Now today we're going to look at possibly one of the biggest things in imperialism, and that is the Spanish-American War. In 1898, and it only lasted a couple months, mind you, we went to war with the Spanish, and it was actually nicknamed Splendid Little War. That's crazy, isn't it? That somebody would want, something like that. Nonetheless, here we are with this. And so, what is the Spanish-American War about, and why are we so concerned with it? It's centered on a country that's actually kind of different, and that is Cuba. Now, this is later on, but we have different things about Cuba. This is actually in the 60s with Fulgencio Batista and Fidel Castro going through that. But Cuba is an island that's pretty close to us, maybe 60, 90 minutes away from the Keys. And at this time, it is a Spanish colony. Remember colonization, correct? And they are basically working for the Spanish, and things begin to get bad. Okay, so it's Cuba. You need to know they're controlled by the Spanish, and there's some things happening. Now, a poet named Jose Marti, here he is, began to write some things about how they were being treated, and these things started making the United States. He wrote this thing right here, La justicia, la igualdad del mérito, el trato respetuoso del hombre, la igualdad plena del derecho, esa es la revolución. In essence, he's saying the justice, the equality based on merit, the respectful treatment of a man, and the full equality of right. This is what they're revolting for. And so he's saying the Spanish are not being just with them. They're not treating them on their merits. They're not being respectful on human rights. And they should revolt. And so all these things start coming over the United States. It's getting it. There's a big debate. Should we get involved? Should we not get involved? Ultimately, they're winning out on not getting involved. Just going back to Washington. We're saying, hey, Monroe Doctrine, but the Spanish were here before that, so we kind of have to respect that. We're going to back away. Then things begin to change when the Spanish send over a general to kind of put these Cuban rebellions down that were happening. His name was General Valeriano Weyler, but they nicknamed him El Carnicero, the Butcher. So you can tell, maybe not a good guy. So when the Butcher gets there, this is when things begin to pick up. The stories are still coming from Jose Marti, but if we go back and remember yellow journalism, correct? Yellow journalism, William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer writing exaggerated stories. This is their heyday, okay? So they get the stories of Jose Marti, and they would put this, right? What Senator Proctor saw in Cuba. And so you see malnourished people, you see people dying, etc. And so yellow journalism kind of helps to accelerate this because people see these cartoons and they say that's not right. No one should be treated that way. Much like you seeing something horrible on Facebook and going, that's not right. That shouldn't happen. And so that is what happens. So yellow journalism is exaggerated media, news stories, and it's going to accelerate the war. If you remember, yellow journalism came off the Yellow Kid, who we've talked about before, and ultimately it will lead us to war. Now, an interesting man comes in there, Frederick Remington. He's a very famous artist, painter, and he went down there and he said, there's nothing bad going on down here. I don't know what you want me to do. William Randolph Hearst wrote him a letter. And he said, I sent you there to cover a rebellion. And I want you to do this. I want you to furnish the pictures, and I'll furnish the war. In other words, yellow journalism, the United States, we really wanted a war at this time to prove we were an imperialist power, to prove we can take over somebody. And the Spanish kind of seemed ripe for the taking. Okay? So Frederick Remington makes pictures. William Randolph Hearst will give the story. Ultimately, here's something that's going on. We have Hearst and we have Pulitzer, and you see they're wearing the yellow dresses for the Yellow Kid, and they're pushing together, and what are they pushing on? It says war. This war really could have been avoided. It was only 3 months long, and it really shouldn't have happened, but it did because of this. Now, Still with yellow journalism, the president isn't sold, Congress isn't sold on this, they're not getting involved until the next thing happens. And until that happens, something else. So these next things are kind of moving forward. The United States gets a hold of what is called the Dulome Letter. And it's from Enrique Dupuy de Dulome. And what he basically says is McKinley, President McKinley, mind you, in 1898, the one before Roosevelt that got shot, right? McKinley is a low politician, weak, and catering to the rabble. In other words, he's bad. And so you can perceive this as Vladimir Putin insulting President Obama, or when Hugo Chavez went in front of the United Nations and said that President Bush was, quote, El Diablo, the devil. And so we have all these things, and anytime you insult our president, the drums of war begin to get a little bit louder. Still, we are hanging off and not getting involved. But there are people, much like Roosevelt, who are jingoist. All right? Now, we've had a couple of these, imperialism, progressivism. The ISM behind it means the practice of doing something. So it's the practice of progressivism, it's the practice of being imperial. In this case, it's practice of being jingo. What's a jingo? Not Jenga. Nothing about knocking towers over, all right? Jingoism is the extreme belief that your own country is always best, which is often shown in enthusiastic support for war against another country. In other words, the people are saying, we are America, we are better than the Spanish, we should go and fight them. Yet nonetheless, it's not happening. After all this, it's not happening. But what we do is we decide, okay, we're going to go and monitor the situation a little bit closer, we're going to check on this. So the USS Maine, one of our big battleships, is placed in Havana Harbor. Here it is, right here on Havana Harbor. There's an old port there, okay? And it's put there to monitor a situation, to see how bad it is. Now what happens is the Maine blows up. And so we have, here we go, yellow journalist gold, right? Crisis at hand, Spanish treachery. Now, here's yellow journalism. Maine destroyed by an outside attack, naval officers believe you don't know, right? Now a second one comes out here, and it's right here. Destruction of the warship Maine was the work of an enemy. Assistant Secretary Roosevelt, that would be Ted E., convinced the explosion of the warship was not an accident. And here's my favorite part, right? We're before sonar here, but yet we have pictures and we can understand that it's here. Again, think. And here we have yellow journalism. Hidden mine or sunken torpedo believed to have been a weapon used against American man of war. Officers' men tell thrilling stories being blown into the air amid a mass of shredded steel and exploding shells. That's what we wanted to be at. Yes, they were awesome. So because the USS Maine blows up, and because of people reading stuff of the yellow journalism, they went to Congress and they said, we've got to go to war now. We've got to do this. And in fact, their rallying cry for the entire war was, quote, remember the Maine. Right? Now, the idea is if we don't go help them, we can't do this. So the USS Maine is blown up. We blame it on the Spanish, and because of yellow journalism, we're going to go get involved. But before we will go to war, Congress is so adamant that we add something called the Teller Amendment. All right? And so what is the Teller Amendment? The Teller Amendment basically says we will not annex Cuba. And as you can see here, it says Cuba Libre, which means free Cuba. We are not going to annex them. We are not going to make them a colony. We're not going to do what we did in Hawaii. We are simply going to use our flag and Uncle Sam, the U.S., and all his military prowess to protect them from the Spanish. In other words, we're going to free the Spanish, and then we're going to leave them alone. Okay? And so that's where we're going at with the war. The next little thing is we'll go through the war itself. But there you have that.